Have you ever stood in front of a mirror and failed to recognize the person staring back at you? Not because of time, not because of age, but because somewhere along the journey, you lost the connection to your purpose, to your clarity, to your center. In a world that constantly demands speed, efficiency, and constant engagement, we rarely pause to ask ourselves, is this the direction I intended to go? We mistake motion for meaning and noise for necessity. But the truth is simple. If you don't reset, your mind becomes cluttered. If you don't restart, your energy becomes misaligned. And if you don't refocus, your path becomes blurred. This moment, right now, is not about regret. It's about realization. You were not born to drift without aim. You were not built to live on autopilot. Within you is the capacity to begin again, not from the beginning, but from experience, with new awareness and deeper intention. Just like a martial artist returns to stillness before striking, or a monk clears his mind before meditation, you too must learn the art of pausing, of letting go, of choosing clarity over chaos. So today, I invite you, not to escape your life, but to realign with it, to reset your mind, to restart your spirit, and to refocus your attention on what truly matters. Because transformation doesn't begin with noise. It begins with silence. And from that silence, the real you can rise again. In today's fast-moving world, stillness is often misunderstood. People associate it with laziness, idleness, or a lack of ambition. But this perception is flawed. Stillness is not weakness. It is not the absence of progress, but the foundation upon which all meaningful progress is built. In the same way that an archer must steady his hand before releasing the arrow, a person must find their inner stillness before taking meaningful action in life. Without stillness, every movement becomes reactive, unfocused, and misaligned with intention. We live in a culture that celebrates constant hustle. Wake up, grind, produce, repeat. But what is the value of this endless cycle if it leads us nowhere meaningful? What if the energy we are using to move forward is actually keeping us stuck in a loop, repeating the same patterns, driven by the same distractions, fueled by the same unresolved emotions? This is why stillness becomes essential, not as an escape, but as a tool, a sacred pause. A moment where the mind becomes quiet, and in that quiet, truth can emerge. When we are constantly in motion, we don't hear ourselves. We don't recognize the internal signals telling us we are tired, misaligned, or drifting from our purpose. Our nervous system stays in a constant state of activation, and eventually, we begin to confuse exhaustion with effort, stress with achievement, and chaos with success. But in stillness, there is clarity. In the absence of noise, we begin to truly listen, not to the outside world, but to ourselves. We start to observe our thoughts rather than be controlled by them. We begin to feel what is real rather than react to what is urgent. This principle is embedded in nature. A seed does not grow because it is pushed and pulled constantly. It grows in silence, buried in darkness, nurtured by stillness. The seasons do not rush. A river does not flow with noise but with grace and purpose. Even the sun rises and sets in a rhythm that is quiet and precise. Why, then, do we believe that our own growth must come from pressure and noise? Stillness allows us to observe. It gives us a mirror. When the water is still, we can see our reflection clearly. When our mind is still, we can see our thoughts without being swept away by them. And when we can observe without judgment, we begin to understand the patterns that run our lives. We begin to see what truly motivates us, what truly matters, and what needs to be released. Without this moment of stillness, we risk building lives that look successful but feel empty. Consider the martial artist before combat. He does not charge forward in haste. He stands still, centered in his breath, grounded in his awareness. That stillness is not weakness. It is control, it is readiness, it is power. It is the space between intention and action. It is the discipline to wait, to feel, and to choose rather than react. This is the wisdom that many overlook because it does not look dramatic or loud. But it is the wisdom that separates the distracted from the deliberate, the lost from the aligned. Stillness also reconnects us to the present. So many people live haunted by the past or anxious about the future. Their minds are split across timelines, never fully inhabiting the now. But presence is only possible through stillness. When we stop, when we breathe, when we become fully aware of this moment, something awakens. We realize that we are not our past mistakes or future fears. We are this breath, this choice, this awareness. And from this place, we can begin again, not from confusion, but from clarity. Modern life tells us that to get ahead, we must always be doing. But the truth is, doing without being leads to burnout. Productivity without purpose leads to emptiness. Success without self-awareness leads to regret. Stillness is how we return to being. It is how we align our doing with our values, our actions with our truth, our goals with our soul. It is not passive. It is deeply active. It requires discipline, awareness, and courage to be still in a world that wants you constantly distracted. When you cultivate stillness, you reclaim your mind. You begin to notice the subtle movements of your inner world. You recognize the difference between a passing thought and a guiding intuition. You begin to respond rather than react. And in this response, there is power, real power. Not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that frees yourself. It is the power to choose your direction, to stand firm in your decisions, to walk your path with calm, steady steps. And before any reset can begin, before any restart can be meaningful, this stillness is required. To restart, you must first detach from what no longer serves you. This detachment is not about abandonment or running away. It is about recognizing the weight you carry and making a conscious decision to let go of what no longer aligns with who you are becoming. Life is a constant cycle of beginnings and endings, yet many of us hold on too tightly to the old. Even when it's silently draining our energy, clouding our judgment, and anchoring us in places we no longer belong. There is a tendency to remain connected to the familiar, even if that familiarity is rooted in pain, confusion, or stagnation. Old habits, outdated beliefs, past relationships, former versions of ourselves. These things often continue to influence our choices long after their relevance has expired. Restarting is not simply about doing something new. It is about making space. You cannot restart your system while old programs are still running in the background. You must consciously identify what needs to be closed, what needs to be cleared, and what needs to be left behind. This process begins internally. You must observe your attachments. What are you clinging to out of fear? What identities have you created around your suffering? In what areas of life are you performing roles that no longer reflect your truth? These are not easy questions. They demand honesty, and honesty demands courage. But without asking them, you risk rebuilding your life on the same unstable foundation. A restart without detachment only recreates the past in a different disguise. Imagine trying to climb a mountain while dragging a heavy suitcase filled with things you no longer use. You may still make progress, but every step is harder than it needs to be. The load slows you down. It consumes your energy. It shifts your focus from the summit to the struggle. Eventually, the burden becomes the story, and the purpose of the climb is forgotten. Detachment is the act of setting down the suitcase. It's not about forgetting the journey so far, but about honoring it enough to move forward without unnecessary weight. Emotional detachment does not mean becoming numb or disconnected. It means no longer allowing your past emotions to control your present actions. It means forgiving what was, releasing what cannot be changed, and choosing to stop feeding energy into narratives that only serve to limit you. Many people say they are ready for change, but they are not ready to detach from the things that bind them to the old. True restarting cannot occur until this inner detachment takes place. Detachment also applies to how we view failure and success. Sometimes we hold on to past failures as evidence that we are not capable. Other times, we hold on to moments of past success and resist change because we fear we may never experience that same validation again. But both are illusions. The past cannot guide the future unless it is viewed through the lens of wisdom, not attachment. Restarting requires that you step into the unknown with empty hands and open eyes. It requires that you surrender the need to know how it will unfold and instead trust in your ability to meet life with presence and adaptability. In many traditions, detachment is not seen as a loss, but as a liberation. It is the cutting of energetic cords that keep you tied to cycles that no longer nourish your spirit. It is a return to simplicity, not in the outer world necessarily, but within. When the mind is no longer preoccupied with holding on, it becomes free to explore, to learn, and to grow. This freedom is the soil in which true transformation can begin to take root. Detachment also creates clarity. When you remove yourself from environments, relationships, and habits that drain you, you begin to see yourself more clearly. You begin to remember who you are beneath the layers of expectation, trauma, and societal programming. With this clarity comes strength. The strength to choose differently, to act intentionally, and to align your energy with your deeper values. Restarting is not about impulsive change or temporary motivation. It is a sacred return, not to where you were, but to who you truly are. And this return cannot happen until the noise of attachment quiets down. Letting go is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice. A conscious commitment to stop feeding what keeps you stuck, a willingness to release the identities that limit you, and to embrace the discomfort that comes with entering a new chapter without carrying the old script. In silence, in solitude, in honest reflection, this process becomes possible. You begin to feel where the tension lives in your body. You notice where your energy contracts, where your thoughts repeat, and where your heart hesitates. These are the areas where detachment is needed. These are the signs that something within is asking to be acknowledged, honored, and then released. The restart is already waiting for you, but it cannot begin until you are willing to let go of what keeps you from it. Refocusing requires clarity, and clarity requires inner silence. In a world that constantly bombards us with information, distractions, and noise, clarity is not something we stumble upon. It is something we must cultivate deliberately. Many people search for focus by organizing their schedules, setting goals, or pushing harder. But without clarity, all effort becomes scattered. Without a quiet mind, we are simply reacting rather than directing. Focus is not just a function of discipline. It is born from understanding, from knowing what truly matters. And this understanding arises when the mind is still. When the mind is crowded, it's like a fogged mirror. You may be looking, but you don't see the truth of what's there. Thoughts move rapidly, one interrupting the next, and decisions are made based on emotion rather than insight. Inner silence, therefore, is not the absence of thought, but the cultivation of awareness. It is the state where thoughts can pass without pulling you into their stories. In this space, you begin to observe, not react. You begin to recognize which thoughts are rooted in truth and which are just noise echoing from the outside world. To refocus means to return your attention to what truly matters, and to do that, you must first become aware of how far your attention has drifted. Most people do not realize how scattered their energy has become. Their minds are consumed by unfinished conversations, imaginary fears, unprocessed emotions, and constant comparison. In such a state, there is no focus, only mental chaos. Clarity cannot emerge from chaos. It emerges from stillness, from the courage to sit with oneself long enough to sort through the noise. Inner silence allows for that sorting. It is the still water in which truth reflects clearly. When you quiet the mind, you begin to sense your deeper intentions. You hear the quiet but persistent voice that tells you where your energy is needed. You realize that not everything that demands your attention deserves it. This realization is the beginning of clarity, and once clarity is present, refocusing becomes natural. You no longer force your focus. You follow it because it aligns with your values, your purpose, and your truth. There is a reason why many spiritual disciplines begin with silence. Silence is not emptiness. It is the space where insight grows. In the same way a sculptor chips away everything that is not the statue, clarity comes when we remove everything that is not essential. We do not add more, we subtract. We strip away distractions, outdated goals, opinions of others, and the noise of constant doing. What remains is simple, pure, and powerful. The essence of what truly matters to you. When you begin to refocus from a place of clarity, your actions become aligned. You stop wasting energy on things that feel urgent, but are not important. You stop saying yes to everything, and start honoring the quiet inner voice that tells you where to place your time, your energy, and your effort. Life begins to feel less overwhelming, not because there is less to do, but because you are no longer pulled in 1,000 directions. You are centered, and from this center, everything becomes clearer. Clarity also creates confidence. When you know what you are doing and why you are doing it, doubts begin to dissolve. You stop second-guessing your path. You stop comparing yourself to others, because you understand that your focus is not meant to be everywhere. It is meant to be where your heart feels alive, where your purpose calls you. But this knowing does not come from the outside. It is not found in opinions, books, or endless advice. It is found in the quiet moments when you are truly present with yourself. Presence is the gateway to clarity. When you are fully here, not lost in the past or projecting into the future, your perception sharpens. You see what needs to be done, what needs to be released, and what needs to be embraced. You begin to notice the small details that once went unseen. You begin to feel the subtle guidance of your own intuition. And this connection with yourself becomes the compass that directs your focus. To refocus is not to strain or struggle. It is to return to what you already know deep within, to realign with what lights you up, to place your attention not where the world pulls you, but where your inner truth leads you. But this return is only possible when the mind is quiet enough to listen. In silence, distractions lose their grip. In silence, clarity begins to form like light breaking through the mist. And once clarity arrives, your focus no longer wavers. It no longer needs to be forced or controlled. It becomes effortless because it is no longer a reaction. It is a reflection of your alignment. A meaningful life is not built through speed, but through alignment. In a world obsessed with productivity, acceleration, and instant outcomes, we are constantly pushed to move faster, achieve more, and stay ahead. But in this relentless pursuit of doing, we often forget to ask ourselves whether what we are doing actually aligns with our values, our purpose, and the truth of who we are. The illusion of progress seduces us into believing that movement equals meaning, yet without alignment, we are simply running in circles, disconnected from depth, clarity, and intention. Alignment is about integrity between our inner world and our outer actions. It is about ensuring that the choices we make, the goals we pursue, and the way we live each day are a reflection of our core values and not just a reaction to external pressure. When our actions are aligned, we feel peace even in challenge. When they are misaligned, we feel tension even in success. That internal dissonance is often overlooked in a society that rewards external achievement more than internal fulfillment. But true meaning arises not from how fast we go, but from how honestly we live. Speed without direction leads to burnout. It convinces us to say yes to things that drain us, to chase goals that do not fulfill us, and to compare our timeline to others as if life were a race. But alignment requires us to slow down, to listen, to check in with ourselves. It requires the courage to step away from the noise and ask deeper questions. What truly matters to me? Why am I doing this? Is this path bringing me closer to who I want to become? These are not questions that can be answered in haste. They require stillness, self-awareness, and reflection. Many people live their entire lives climbing ladders only to discover that the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. They were fast, they were efficient, but they were not aligned. And in that misalignment, something essential was lost. The joy of the journey, the fulfillment of purpose, the depth of experience. Alignment brings us back to the essence. It reminds us that life is not about checking off boxes or impressing others, but about honoring our inner truth and walking in accordance with it, even when the world is pulling us in other directions. When we live in alignment, our energy changes. We no longer need to force motivation. We wake up with a sense of direction, not because everything is easy, but because everything is meaningful. Even the hard moments serve a greater purpose. We stop asking how fast we can get somewhere and start asking how deeply we can connect to the present step. That shift transforms not only our actions, but the quality of our life. We become more grounded, more centered, more alive. Alignment is not static. It is a continual process. As we grow, our values evolve, our desires shift, and our purpose deepens. This means that staying aligned requires constant attention. It is not a one-time decision, but a way of living. It means consistently checking whether our habits reflect our intentions, whether our environment supports our growth, and whether our relationships nurture our soul. When misalignment is ignored, it becomes suffering. When it is addressed, it becomes transformation. To live in alignment also means to honor our natural rhythm. Just like nature has seasons, we, too, have phases of energy, rest, creativity, and reflection. But speed tries to override this rhythm. It tells us to always be in summer, always be producing, always be moving forward. Yet real alignment respects the cycle. It understands that rest is not weakness, that slowing down is not failure, and that sometimes the most powerful progress is invisible, happening beneath the surface, where roots grow deep before anything is seen. Meaning comes not from how much we do, but from how honestly we live. We can be busy and unfulfilled, productive and disconnected, but when our life is guided by alignment, every action, no matter how small, becomes a step toward purpose. Conversations become deeper, work becomes more intentional, and decisions carry more weight. We stop chasing validation and begin embodying our values. We become less reactive and more responsive. And in this responsiveness, we reclaim our power. When you look back on your life, what will matter is not how quickly you moved, but how truly you lived. Not how far you went, but how aligned you stayed with your deepest self. A meaningful life is not found at the finish line. It is built in each aligned step, each conscious breath, and each moment of presence where you chose to be true to yourself over being fast for the world. And so, the journey of resetting, restarting, and refocusing is not about escaping life. It is about returning to it with awareness. It is about understanding that stillness is the foundation of strength, that letting go is an act of courage, that clarity arises only in silence, and that true meaning is found not in speed, but in alignment. In a world that constantly pulls your attention outward, this journey invites you to turn inward, to pause, to release, to listen, and then to move forward, not as a reaction to pressure, but as a reflection of your purpose. Because the most powerful transformation does not begin with doing more, but with becoming more aligned with who you truly are.